All right.
So we're here in our new digs, our new studio. It's not perfect.
I love it.
We're missing the hair light.
This is more my
something that,
speed. This is a little more my speed.
and I think we could afford to be missing the hair light. So.
Yeah, wait. Hair lights. Yeah, we're missing hair lights. So hopefully next time we'll have hair lights, but I don't know about our hair.
Yeah. So you had some questions for me about a patient that you were speaking to this week.
Yeah, thinking a lot about inflammation, and over the years in practice, inflammation comes up a lot, whether it be, aches from their inflammation as a chiropractor in their back and neck, but digestive inflammation. We hear a lot of different kinds of inflammation. We send patients for blood work for C-reactive protein. So even myself, I wonder, I had a patient come in this week, 40 years old, shoulder issues. So we've always been working with the back. Shoulders bothered him, a lot of inflammation physically, but a lot of brain fog. Gets around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he loses his clarity. And he's worried because he got his blood work, and his doctor said his blood work was normal, and said it was probably all kind of stress related. But we're talking about inflammation. He's concerned about that. He's watched a couple podcasts. So what about inflammation is a health issue? And then what about, is it all the same? Because is the shoulder pain in my body contributing to heart disease?
Great question. So the word inflammation is thrown around very loosely, right? We take anti-inflammatory medications. We take anti-inflammatory supplements. We're told, that symptom must be inflammation. And therefore, taking an anti-inflammatory would be helpful. And that's fine. But I think there's just a lack of understanding of what inflammation is among doctors. We learn in school that inflammation is a result of the immune system being activated. And what activates the immune system? Like a virus or a bacteria or some kind of acute infection. So we first learn about inflammation in the context of your body trying to fight something, right? Trying to defeat a virus, trying to defeat a bacteria. Or we learn about inflammation because, somebody kicks you in the shins and it hurts, and there's local inflammation.
Well, you hear inflammation, so is inflammation a good thing or is it a bad thing? That's really, I think that's the question for today.
Right. So inflammation clearly is part of the healing process.
Right.
Absolutely not necessary. The problems occur when inflammation becomes chronic. So if we separate inflammation out into two categories, acute and chronic, right? Acute is I kicked you in the shins, you have a bruise on your shins, and that's going to be self-limited as your immune system uses inflammation to clean up the debris,
right?
Okay, of the damage.
It's part of the process.
Yeah,
which would make it a good thing.
An infection.
If it didn't work, then it'd be a bad thing, right? So we need inflammation. So in that context of acute injury, the inflammation is part of the healing process.
Yeah, so you have to ask yourself, and most people are well equipped to ask themselves, if I have an acute injury, why would I take an anti-inflammatory if it's part of the healing process? Just to reduce something called pain? Perhaps you're stopping a mechanism that you need to heal properly, right? So for acute infection, whether it be due to trauma or let's just say infection, right? So a virus is, again, it's acute. It's self-limited. Your immune system is going to get on top of it. It's going to defeat the virus or the bacteria, and everything should go back to normal. That's acute inflammation. I think what everyone has questions about is chronic inflammation. Right. When the inflammatory process that is healing and helpful, although it hurts, right? And there's reasons why it hurts. The inflammatory process creates these chemicals that sensitize nerve fibers that give us pain, but that pain is protecting you from doing something that might injure you further, right? So if you had an injury to your knee, well, the pain might prevent you from moving in a way that would injure you further to allow the healing process to do what it's supposed to do.
Right. I tell my patients, when that happens, the pain and the muscle spasm is your body's brilliant reaction to splint, to protect you. It doesn't know if that's happening again, so it's protecting yourself. The pain's keeping you from going dancing until it heals again, I tell them, and they laugh. But the truth is, the pain is part of the process, and the spasm is part of the process.
And the reason why I think people listen to us is not only that we're passionate about what we do. We're always learning. We have 30 years experience individually. We have a lot of patient experience, but we also come with a philosophy, and that's the chiropractic philosophy that the body doesn't make stupid mistakes. And if you think that creating pain after an injury is a mistake that you have to fix with your Tylenol or your Advil, you're sadly mistaken. So the problem is not pain. The problem is the injury, and you have to let the body do what it needs to do. So that's just from core principles, like basic principles. That's, looking at the body, you do have to heal, right?
Well, there's this very specific cascade that happens during that acute inflammation process, and the anti-inflammatories are blocking that from occurring,
Right.
so you have less of the pain and less of the inflammation.
Right.
But this inflammation is good acute inflammation, so you're to get the benefit of not feeling well or whatever you think you're doing to deal with the symptom. You're interfering with the natural acute response, which is trying to heal you.
Correct.
Okay, because that's important for people to realize, because it's like they think the problem is the symptom, and what ends up happening is they attack it
Right.
with the meds,
Right.
and they end up maybe dealing with the symptom, but causing actually more of a problem in the long run. So basically, what you're saying is when most people remember, they grab the Advil, the Tylenol, whatever it might be, when they have an injury because they're in pain, what they're really doing is they're stopping and they're interfering with their natural healing process just to feel better. But
Yeah.
they probably don't realize that, or they think, well, maybe I'll just slow it down a little bit, but it's worth the expense. So tell me what's actually happening in that cascade and what's getting interfered with by these anti-inflammatory meds
Yeah,
people
I
are
mean,
taking.
the anti-inflammatory, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory
Right.
drugs, NSAIDs, most people know that they are going to basically interfere with certain enzyme processes that will reduce those.
Most people don't know that at all, by the way. that's why I'm here.
Yeah. So there's there are steroidal anti-inflammatories and non-steroidal. So non-steroidal are going to be your aspirin, your Advil, your Tylenol, your naproxen, Aleve, all of these types of medications that you can buy over the counter and prescription. And then there's the non-steroidal, which are going to be, the steroidal, which are going to be like cortisone injections and things of that nature. And if you're an athlete and you need to get back on the field and you actually only care about the game and you don't really care about the consequences after that, doing a cortisone injection can dramatically reduce your inflammation and allow you to get back on the field. But again, for the intents and purposes of this conversation, the acute problem is, again, if you're going to take those medications because you need to feel better for whatever reason, the trade-off is going to be you're stopping the healing process or a portion of the healing process, and that could lead to further degenerative changes in the future. That's a risk-to-benefit ratio that you have to determine. Have you ever taken an Advil for any reason?
Right.
Have you?
I have, yes.
Yeah, so have I. And again,
It's actually my drug of choice when it's really, really, really bad.
when it's really, really bad.
If I'm being honest.
And there are a lot of people in our profession who I haven't taken that, like me, I haven't had a Coca-Cola in like 25 years.
It becomes a conversation with me and my wife. I tell my wife I'm taking two the big deal.
Right. It's a big deal.
That's as
It's
crazy
a big
as
deal.
it gets. Yeah.
And there's trade-offs, right?
And I'm a chronic pain person. I live in chronic pain.
Yeah.
My story is leaving practice in chronic pain. So I deal with a lot of pain. And maybe if it's really bad once every 6 weeks, I don't drink alcohol or do any drugs.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm going to party on a Saturday night. I'm going to get a good night's sleep because I'm in so much pain from my workout.
Right.
So whatever. So I get it. But
Yeah.
there's an expense to that.
There is an expense. And part of that expense is not only interrupting the healing process, but you're also now messing with some other systems in your body. It has a blood thinning effect. It messes with your GI tract, and it actually, there's evidence that if you do 600 milligrams of ibuprofen or Advil, you're going to lose basically a tablespoon of blood out of your upper GI tract. So it does result in GI.
Now I'll never do it again. Thank you. That's important. It's important to know because we're talking about because acute, and I never really looked at it this way, but the acute inflammation is an incredible celebration of the natural immunity response, and it's meant to be. It's serving us.
Yeah.
And even though it's not comfortable, like many other things in life, right? It's important. It's appropriate. It's perfect, and it's the way the body heals.
Right.
So we're interfering with that, And I think a lot of people see that acute pain from an injury as the bad guy.
Right.
And I think looking at that from a different perspective may result in people addressing it from a different perspective. Great. So now,
So that's the acute story.
yeah, I want to
Risk
get into
to
this.
benefit ratio, making that decision, knowing what you're doing, understanding that there's no evidence to believe that taking Advil or Tylenol or any of these medications long term is beneficial in any way. These are just acute.
Right.
But
And
like
there's-
yourself,
and
there
I've
are people living in chronic pain who are taking this multiple times a week for years.
You want to hear a story?
And that, yeah.
I know of a patient, a friend of mine's patient, who's a young girl in her early on high school, was having chronic headaches. So she went to the doctor, and they were trying to figure everything out, blood work and everything came back negative. So one day she took a Tylenol, and the Tylenol helped. And she's like, they think she's in her teens, so she starts taking Tylenol every day. So she has headaches every day. She takes Tylenol as a part of her regular routine. It helps. She takes it. She's 15. She gets into her 20s and starts to have kidney failure. Now, if you look in liver issues, you start looking at the side effects of Tylenol over time, chronic use. She's breaking down her organs. Ultimately, her kidneys get affected. She has to go on dialysis. She has all kinds of kidney issues. And she finally goes to a colleague of ours, to the chiropractor.
Yeah.
Still, because she still has the headaches, right? Chiropractor assesses her C1 vertebrae or atlas, adjusts it, and for the first time her headaches go away.
How many times do we have to hear that story?
Well, it's thinking about like what her mother would have. What if she would have gone to the chiropractor in her teens? What she would have had. Now her headaches are gone, but she has chronic kidney disease.
Do you know how many times I ask people what medications they take, and they say something like Tylenol, how long you've been taking it? I've been taking it 3, 4, 5 times a week for the last 3 years. And then I ask the next question, why do you take it? And there's headaches. And then I ask the next question, is it helping? No. Why are you taking it?
Right.
When you talk about risk to benefit ratio, and this is more common than you would, it sounds insane to hear me say it out loud, but they're taking medication multiple times a week for years, and it's not even helping them.
It's not even working.
It has become a habit, right? How many television commercials did we see growing up where to pick on Tylenol, I mean, everyone's picking on Tylenol these days, but it was how mothers showed love to their children.
Right.
That's what the commercials were. I love you. Take this. I mean, that is marketing that grabs people and makes you think it's better than a vitamin.
Sure, and I've had medical doctors tell me, I had mentioned toxicity of vitamins.
Yep.
I'm sorry, of vitamins. I can't even say medication, right? Drug, pharmaceuticals, and they'll say, well, there's toxins all around you anyway. At least this is going to help you. And that was the philosophy, and so it's a philosophy.
Yeah.
So from a chiropractic perspective, honoring and respecting how the body naturally works, and working with it as opposed to interfering with processes so patients have a better experience of the day.
Yeah.
But in the long run, it's breaking down their body.
And by the way, our profession, the chiropractic profession, gets a lot of flack for talking about philosophy. Everybody has a philosophy. Your medical doctor has a philosophy. If they don't define it, it's some compilation of nonsense based on marketing.
Your philosophy is your view of reality.
That's
hopefully, right. Now, view of reality. So the question is, what's your view of reality based on?
Right.
Dogmatic, jargon and converse, or repeating what other people have said that you believe and trust, or have you done the work to check out your epistemological,
right?
Meaning you're knowing your data to prove your point. And that's so important because if I can ask you the question, why do you do that? Or where did you learn that? Or what is the facts or the science that proves that? And you can say, oh, somebody told me, or I saw it.
Well, it's conventional wisdom, right?
Me.
So you have a choice. Once somebody asks you that question, you're hit the fork in the road. The fork in the road is, well, I trust conventional wisdom. I'm in the crowd. 80% of the people say the same thing. Therefore, I'm safe, and I move on. And I just forget. I forget that I hit a fork in the road. I just take the path. Or you say, shit, I never questioned that. Now I have to question it, and then you got to be prepared for what you're about to find out.
And you, it may change your perspective, and should not be a fearful situation. Imagine having a view of reality that you may not have thought about or wondered where you got it from, right? And now all of a sudden it's part of what drives your who you are.
Right.
What if you found out that there is something different about what you thought, or you were wrong, or there's so you're seeing it from a different perspective? That would change your view of reality.
Right.
Now, if that's not exciting to somebody who wants to seek and learn, I mean, I don't know what is, but most people are afraid because it challenges their foundational beliefs.
But we're in such an exciting time right now. We're in such an exciting time because trust in institutions that gave us decades of conventional wisdom has deteriorated to levels that we've talked about before, and I mean everybody kind of knows, right?
Trust the science,
right?
Let's just talk about that word, and then because it's.
By the way, hearing somebody say "trust the science" should get you to immediately question what the hell it is they're about to say.
Because science is nothing but questioning. We're scientists, so if you're a scientist or a doctor, if you come up in academics and you've had a degree in some sort of science or biology, you're constantly seeking and learning. That's why we're here. Yeah. You're the master. You always learn. That's why I love this podcast. You'd never have stopped. So imagine learning and learning, constantly changing your view, not 180 degrees.
Yeah.
You're just fine-tuning it because you're basing it on knowledge.
And most people are not in our profession. So if you're a plumber, if you're an accountant, if you're an attorney, if you're a singer, you still have a body that was given to you that you're responsible for. And do you really want to trust what now seems to be untrustworthy information about your future, right? This is your body
questions.
Is your, right.
That's all we want. People just ask. Just be aware and always ask questions. Ask your doctor questions. Most medical doctors don't like to answer questions because they have to kind of be challenged on maybe why they're giving you that advice. Honestly, for decades and probably forever in medicine, they never were challenged before. Right. This is new to them. As chiropractors, we've been challenged from day one. We've been quacker practice from day one. Like, you got to prove it. So you know what? Philosophy to a chiropractor, knowing that you know what you know, has been found part of our foundational process. Right. So I want to ask this question, getting back to inflammation and chronic inflammation. So we know acute. Acute apparently is good for you, even though it hurts. Yeah. We decided that, right? We want to allow that to play itself out.
And what's going to trigger it are two things typically that we talk about, and that's going to be trauma and infection, right? Getting rid of something that is in your space that shouldn't be there. And again, it doesn't have to be infection. It could be mold. It could be food additives. It could be things that
But kicking the shin, we got, right?
Yeah.
And everybody gets.
Yeah.
Before we leave acute, and we want to honor acute for our body processing properly, talk to us about that infection, that bacterial, viral, or some kind of infection in our body, because it'll hit. You know, we all went through the pandemic recently, and we talked about reactions and inflammation and what goes on in an immune response. So talk just about how inflammation has a play in that.
Think about a violent response that a police force has to have to a crime scene or a military operation. And this is absolutely accurate. The immune system will go in and start using weapons of destruction to take out what needs to be removed. Those things are things like nitric oxide, which we've talked about before in a very healthy context, but we use nitric oxide to actually destroy cell membranes. Reactive oxygen species, right? So we kind of want to blow up things, right? So our cells will release chemical mediators that are absolutely damaging to cells we want to damage. So those are virus-infected cells. Those are bacterial cells. Those are, again, when fighting an infection. And in doing so, just like anything else, there's collateral damage. And the collateral damage is, it's not like a sniper rifle to the area. It's kind of like I'm spraying a shotgun blast.
Right. Agent Orange.
Right. I'm not only taking out the bad guy, I'm taking out the wall and the sheetrock and the lights and the TV and like you just kind of do some damage. So then After that, the immune system has to stick around and clean up that mess, right? So those chemical mediators that we're talking about, nitric oxide, reactive oxygen species, oxidation, all of these terms are terms associated with inflammation. So that's what's happening in an acute phase. The question is, what's happening in a chronic phase?
Well, yeah, and let's talk about that. When we have chronic inflammation, how does it show up in the body when we start talking about chronic? I mean, I get the carpal tunnel from the typing, and I get the pitchers with the throwing a lot, and chiropractors with the shoulders, right?
Repetitive stress in injuries, right? So that follows the injury model, but it's
every day
you're chronically re-injuring it, right? So that's one form of a chronic problem because you're never giving it an opportunity to heal.
Right.
But then there's chronic inflammation that is associated with infections. There is chronic inflammation that is associated with other systems in the body. So from an infection standpoint, we know Lyme disease can be devastating and it can be very chronic. It can be lifelong. We know H. pylori, Helicobacter pylori, famous for being shown to be the cause of ulcers. It's kind of a stomach infection that can be chronic. Epstein-Barr virus can not that there's anything inherent about the Epstein-Barr virus that's terribly dangerous, but when your immune system is compromised, it can be a chronic problem.
So this is a type of thing where you're having like say Lyme disease. It stays in your body, and Lyme is a bacterial infection.
It's a bacterial infection.
But if it does, so your body's constantly fighting, almost like as if it was an autoimmune type of thing where you can't get it out, and your body's waking up or 24/7 dealing with.
So we usually think of chronic inflammation in very similar terms as autoimmunity. Because autoimmunity, by definition, is your immune system attacking you. Mm-hmm. And because you're not going anywhere, it's going to attack you for a lifetime, right? So if you're attacking your thyroid, you'll always be attacking your thyroid because your thyroid's not going anywhere.
Right.
So if the bacteria is not going anywhere, it's kind of like this long, protracted war where you're just kind of going back and forth. And eventually your defense systems can be compromised to the point where you can't make enough white blood. Like you start to fatigue, you start to run out of ammunition, right? And the bacteria can take hold. But I think for most people...
So can we label that as chronic inflammation, which is bad and can affect you for the rest of your life, that is not necessarily a lifestyle? That's something that was acquired somehow?
Yeah, so...
Is it different from what we're going to get into next, or is that something that we should?
No. I think we can dive in a little deeper, and you and I are in the process of building a community where the deep dive, I think, for people who are really interested in the intricate detail of a lot of this stuff, would be better served joining our community. But for this purpose, we kind of want to keep it at a little bit of a high level. Because we want people to have an understanding of what they're talking about and some things that they can do about it.
Right.
But when it comes to chronic infections, you have to ask yourself, well, why did it get chronic to begin with? Why, if I take 1,000 people in the Northeast who have no symptoms whatsoever and test them for having had in the past Lyme disease, a significant percentage of them have had it and they're not dealing with chronic Lyme infection.
Really? Okay.
So it's not like, it's kind of like polio, right? The assumption is, you get polio, you're going to be paralyzed.
Sorry.
It's not that you're going to be paralyzed. A very small percentage of people experience the neurologic effects of polio. For everybody else, it was just a GI infection.
Really? Okay.
From filthy water. And for many people who got polio, you never knew you had it. Maybe it just caused some GI symptoms for a couple of days and you move on. It never got into your nervous system. A very small percentage are going to get it infiltrate into their nervous system. So you could safely say that millions of people had a polio infection and never experienced the clinical syndrome.
Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so the same thing is true for Epstein-Barr. Not everybody gets mono. The same thing is true for Lyme. Not everybody has the dementia associated with
HIV/AIDS, right?
Correct. Well, okay, so yes, and again, I don't want to do a deep dive into complex things. But why do some people get COVID and never even know it, and other people, succumb to it? So that question about chronic inflammation associated with infection begs the question, why couldn't your immune system get on top of it to begin with, right? But let's keep this high level about inflammation.
Yes.
The number one source of daily inflammation for every human being on planet Earth.
Can I guess?
Yes.
Digestive system.
Yes. Because food, what is the? Now let's back up and talk about what inflammation is for. Your immune system's job, and again, inflammation is a byproduct of the immune system. So the immune system's job is to protect you from the outside world, clean up debris, and swim around your body in a military kind of way or a police force kind of way, and just ask a simple question: is this me, or is it not me? Right? Is this my eyeball? Yes, leave it alone. Is this my big toe? Yes, leave it alone. If the answer to the question is no, it's not me, then you have to ask the second question: is it safe or is it dangerous? So if the immune system is swimming around, this is my eyeball, this is my big toe, oh, here's some chicken and broccoli. That's not me. But is it safe? Yeah, it's food. Mm-hmm. Leave it alone. Or it's a flu virus. It's not me, and it's dangerous. So now I'm going to attack, and this is the universal Pac-Man sign for attacking, right? So that's the job of the immune system. Well, every single day we eat food that is not you. It goes into our digestive system and our small intestines, which it's believed 85% of the human immune system is in your small intestines. Right. Why? Because that's the interface where the outside world and the inside world come really close together. So you need a good security force there.
Right. Your digestive system technically is external to your body. Correct. In the sense that it's a tube, and I'm not telling you, I'm telling you, right? It's a tube, right? It's a tube from your mouth to your butt. Yep. It may out-pocket at the belly. It may out-pocket at certain places, but it is a continuous tube to the outside with a barrier, right? The digestive intestines are the barrier, which are allowing some things in and out and then passing things through.
Right.
So there's
a selective barrier.
Yeah, so here we are where the immune system needs to be able to be the guard for our body.
A great analogy is everybody outside of the airport wants to get into the terminal. In order to get from the outside of the airport into the terminal, you have to go through the blue shirts. Mm-hmm. The blue shirts is the small intestines, right? And sometimes things are going to get through that shouldn't get through. And it's the immune system's job to be vigilant about that. So food, by definition, is foreign, and by definition is inflammatory. That doesn't mean that it's bad for you, right?
And then what's on the food, what's in the food, that's a conversation.
Bacteria, viruses, and parasite. If you think that your kitchen is so clean and you think there's no bacteria, I mean...
or even the food itself, like where it comes from and how it's processed. Or is it all food? Is it partially made from a plant on the ground? Is it partially made from a plant in Elizabeth, New Jersey, right? That's important.
Correct. Right. So Elizabeth, New Jersey is going to be a lot more toxic than the soil.
Red number 7 and all the stuff they stick in there, right?
Right. So all of these things are going to get through, and the immune system's kind of doing its job. That is what should be normal inflammation. By the way, when it comes to sterility, right? What a hospital has to go through to make a sterile environment for surgery, and they still have massive infection problems. But also, anyone who's made sourdough starter.
I do.
Yeah. What do you do? You just let the bacteria in the air, just kind of do its thing, and it's in the air everywhere all the time.
It's God. It's like literally you're taking bacteria that's flying around, and it lands on your flour and water, and every day it starts to create its own fermentation process. It's invisible, but it's amazing.
So there's always something to defend you against. Running around with a mask and wiping things down with alcohol, it's a absolutely futile way to try to hide from things. Okay. Now, food by definition is pro-inflammatory in a good way. It's protective unless it's not in a good way. Unless your immune system is overwhelmed with things to defend you against. if we go back 6,000 years, bacteria in the air, yeast and dirt and all of that was stimulating the human immune system, and away we went. Now we have all of that plus all of the toxins that you mentioned, and the mold and the flame retardant chemicals in our pajamas and in our bedding and our furniture. We have exposure to a million things. 80,000 new chemical compounds in our daily environment since the end of World War II. Only a fraction of them have been even tested for human toxicity. So we have no idea.
And you're rubbing them on your body, and you're putting them in your hair, and you're washing your clothes, and we clean our house, and we don't even think about how we're taking in toxins in our bodies, dealing with it.
Correct.
Right?
So with that, we have this greater propensity for chronic inflammation. So now your immune system is hypervigilant. You got a whole police force that's really busy. And if you're in a bad neighborhood and you're a cop that's really busy, you're far more likely to make stupid mistakes. And the immune system can do that. The immune system can start attacking food. Gluten sensitivity is not even, it was always considered many, many decades ago as being a part of a disease called celiac disease. And now we know that gluten sensitivity is not just about celiac disease. And, we have to ask questions about what's attached to that gluten in the processing of food. We have to ask questions about genetic modifications to that gluten molecule. And it's not just gluten. There's other proteins in food and grains and processed foods that our immune system can react to. And we can actually test for a lot of them. So if you're thinking that and we'll just use gluten because it's the big bad guy in the street. If you're thinking that gluten is a bad guy, the same way a flu virus is a bad guy, and the immune system's like, this is not like chicken and broccoli. It's not like the virus. It's more like the virus than the chicken and broccoli. I can't really decide. I'm going to attack both. So now you have this food sensitivity that every time you eat it, you're causing this almost defensive viral inflammatory response. So when you find that food causes brain fog, fatigue, gas, bloating, you have to say to yourself, perhaps there's something that I'm eating that my immune system is hyper responding to. And now that inflammation, it's in your gut, it's in your bloodstream, circulates everywhere.
Right. It's lowering your overall ability to fight everything.
Everything. And it spreads it out. So now it's going to that sensitive injury you had in your lower back. Now it's going to your knees after being a runner for 20 years. And now you're having joint pain and you think the problem is the joint, right? I always say to people who are like 50 plus years old, they develop knee pain and they go and they see this degenerative process in their knee, right? This arthritis. Well, I always say to them when we look at their x-ray, what do you think that knee looked like 6 months ago? What do you think it looked like on an x-ray a year ago? It looked exactly the same. It's been degenerating for 2 decades. Your pain started last week. So that degeneration wasn't different 2 weeks ago. So what's different? And perhaps that degenerative joint is more sensitive to circulating inflammation brought on by your lifestyle.
Let me ask a question. So here's the 50-year-old guy with the knee, that same patient, all of a sudden he's dealing. Is this because over time you're seeing, because the diet didn't necessarily change? As a matter of fact, at that point, you're probably locked in to a pretty normal routine, probably trying to stay healthy, trying to eat healthy. So here's a guy, all of a sudden he's starting to have those symptoms. Is it all of a sudden, or is this something that's been building over time, and now you've got this systemic inflammation, and now your knee obviously is the one that's going to show up the most because it's most inflamed, as well as everything else that's at threshold for inflammation, which could be the brain fog and the other chronic issues you're dealing with.
The king of analogies in our profession is James Chestnut. And when he had that analogy of swimming in the ocean, and you're doing fine because you're a good swimmer and you're young and you have a backpack on and there's only a couple of rocks in your backpack, but somebody keeps swimming by and putting more rocks in your backpack, eventually you're going to sink if you keep trying to put more and more rocks in your backpack. And the question I think you're asking is there a point where you just exceeded, you just kind of went over the threshold? And
or inadvertently, meaning like you're just doing your thing.
Nothing is different.
And the guy came in, the knee started hurting 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
But my point is that any person would think that in the past 2 weeks, that all of a sudden this is happening. Right. And I want people to just take that 30,000-foot view and realize that the knee is now starting to show up in this way, and other things other random things that you may not put your finger on because of your diet.
How many patients have we had that reached down to pick up a waste paper basket and their back went out?
Yeah.
Do you really think the waste paper basket was that heavy?
They picked it up 100 times before.
It's their own body weight.
Well, the question I have here is now I'm going to tie in what I do, right? This autonomia. We're talking about your autonomic nervous system. What is the role that your autonomic nervous system has in this? Because if you're in fight or flight and you're having stress, I know that your immune system isn't functioning properly. It's at its lowest when you're under stress.
Yeah.
So what is the impact stress has on inflammation and aches and pains in the body?
So we know that the autonomic nervous system is how we digest food. So if you're in a state of fight or flight, you're clearly not able to be in a state of resting and digesting, and there's a good chance that while you're stressed, you're eating lunch. So now you're not breaking your food down the way you should. These large undigested proteins are going to be far more abundant while you're in that state. Again, creating this greater chance of your immune system seeing a large undigested protein as being something foreign to defend you against. So I think that when you're in a state of resting, digesting, or growth, healing, and repair, when your autonomic nervous system is functioning the way it should, and then you eat a meal, you're far more likely to produce the right amount of stomach acid and digestive enzymes and break that food down so that nutrients get into your bloodstream, not large undigested food particles. So again, there's this time component, right? Chronicity. At some point, it just gets to a boiling point, water at 211 degrees doesn't really do anything. And once it hits 212,
that's all it makes a difference.
All kinds of things happen, yeah.
The one thing I'm thinking about is you're saying that about the ability to digest the food in the autonomic nervous system, but we also know that as your cortisol level increases, your immune system decreases. So the stress itself is lowering your inflammatory and your immune response.
So acute autoimmune diseases historically were treated with cortisone, right? Because it blunted the immune response. So under stress, you can't deal with a knee twist when you're running away from a lion. So when you produce stress hormones, you can run. You can run, right? I used to say to patients that would come in and they could barely move, their back is killing them. If this building were on fire, you'd be running down those stairs like a track athlete. So the stress system will dampen the immune system. You feel better because you're not healing,
right?
Right. So you have less inflammation, but that's going to catch up with you because you're not healing.
You're burning on reserves,
right,
and you're eventually going to have to pay for it.
Right.
So, great. I want to be able to realize that there's many factors to this chronic issue and inflammation.
All right. Let's get to the one that you didn't bring up, and that's aging. All right. There is a term called inflammaging.
Really?
So inflammaging is, because again, if you think about the aging process, you can narrow it down to two things. You can narrow it down to chronic inflammation and the decrease in efficiency and abundance of mitochondria. Mitochondria, your energy producing. So anything that contributes to your immune system being dampened or your inflammation going up, anything that increases your inability to replace old mitochondria and make new ones and stay efficient, that's the aging process, right? That's the aging process. And our immune system gets busier as we get older because we have cells in our body that are old. And because we're so comfortable It's 72 degrees all the time. We're constantly feeding ourselves. We have a refrigerator and a pantry full of food. There's very little stress on our, very little stress. I'm not talking about the bill you got in the mail. I'm talking about physical stress. Heat shock proteins from a sauna, or heat shock proteins, cold shock proteins from a cold plunge, or what happens when you make inflammatory responses to exercise. What you do is your immune system goes and takes these old cells that are just old. Like just imagine you have muscle cells that just don't contract the way they should. Your immune system should go, sense that is a dying cell. Let's kill it off already. Kill it off, remove the debris, and replace it with a new cell. Right? So that's called senescence. Senescence means an old dysfunctional cell that's still alive using up resources. No, you want to kick those guys out. Not just muscle cells, but immune cells. You don't want senescent immune cells. When we get older, we're less able to deal with the flu because of that.
So the way to go about that is, I'm thinking, is that exercise? Is that using your body and increasing mitochondria that way? I know we're talking. We don't want to get too much into because I'm thinking about everything you just said. We talked about dysautonomia. Mm-hmm. We talked about digestion. We talked about movement. We talked about mitochondria. These are all the things that we work on with our clients in different elements to help increase. So my thought is, like, what's when it comes to that, how are we going to increase our mitochondria, or are we gonna? There's multiple ways. Is that done through exercise? Done through nutrition?
And we've talked about this a million times. So yes, all of it. All the things that need to be done. But it's not enough for people, especially over the age of 50, to say, well, I have a good diet. I exercise. I mean, I get enough sunshine. No, what you're saying is, compared to your neighbor, you might be doing better. But one thing we know about the American public is your neighbor's sick.
Right.
So being better than your neighbor is not an accomplishment. And a lot of times when we're 50 plus, we're doing things, we're trying to be like who we were when we were 20, and we're actually causing inflammation, right? So yes, we've talked about this before. Long duration, low intensity, zone 2 kinds of exercise become more and more important as you get older. Resistance exercise, lifting weights, lifting heavy things becomes more important as you get older. But also doing some high intensity things are important, but doing it selectively, for a certain amount of time, so you don't cause problems. Instead, you fix problems. And then there's, fasting. I mean, we talked about senescent cells. One thing we know about fasting, after like 5 to 7 days of doing a water fast, the bone marrow on an MRI will shrink like 40%. And then when you refeed with healthy food or any food, you're going to reflate. What is that reflation? That is, those are, the die-off of senescent old immune cells and the creation of new ones, which are young and healthy and responsive. So the word hormesis means I'm going to give the body a stress, fasting, exercise, sauna, cold plunge. I'm going to put the body into a state of stress, and the response itself is going to keep you younger, is going to protect your mitochondria, is going to protect your immune system, is going to protect your ability to make inflammation in a way that inflammation helps you and doesn't harm you.
What I'm hearing here is we don't want to be senescent people.
Correct.
Right? You don't want to be a senescent human being.
That's
and
right.
What I'm thinking a lot of, and I'm just kind of piece this together so I can wrap my brain around it, is the fact that the body responds to what we ask it to do. It's incredibly adaptive. We know that as chiropractors. We know that through using our physical fitness. To get healthy, we have to put a certain stress. The response to get stronger. So the philosophy that I'm trying to pick up here and kind of get out there is the fact that your body, if you do nothing, right? If we get older and we get comfortable, and it's so easy to get comfortable and get into our routines. Maybe we used to work out 5 days a week. Now we get to the gym twice a week and starting to slow down. The body responds almost as if we're telling it we are no longer driving ourselves towards growth and living. we want to be comfortable. And the ultimate comfort is warm, fuzzy couch. And the ultimate comfort is laying
6
in a
feet
casket.
under.
So if you're telling your body that the game's now over, we no longer need to do these things, the body say, okay, let's start preparing ourselves for the grave, right? So what I like to say is, why don't we keep challenging? If I get up every day, I put a weighted backpack on, and I walk 3 or 4 miles in the morning, and I eat things a certain way, and I go into a cold plunge in a sauna. Like, I'm telling my body that it needs to be on guard and reactive to new stimulus in a safe way, right? And we're creating these eustress or hormetic stresses in a safe way, in a strategic way, that our body responds and wants to live and grow and move on. And I want our brain works that way, our autonomic nervous system works that way. But once we start to tell the brain what to do, it will start preparing itself for whatever we're asking it to do or not do.
Yeah.
So I love this conversation because our community is all about those pillars, right? How do we look at functional movement? How do we look at increasing mitochondria? How do we look at changing blood work with diet? How do we level down and recalibrate our autonomic nervous system? This is how we're just priming our body for our maximum experience of living, and the immune system responds and our body responds. And when we do the opposite, which we have the option to do, the body will absolutely listen to us and bring us wherever it wants to go. And if we're telling it wants to rest and be relaxed and eat and drink and be merry and do whatever, then we're saying we're now giving up. Get ready for the long sleep.
let's give everyone listening to this some tools that they can test everything we said for themselves. Anyone experiencing what they believe to be chronic inflammation. First of all, what is it about blood work that can give you some clues? Well, we know that one of the primary drivers of inflammation is going to be insulin resistance. So when you see your triglycerides climbing, when you see your hemoglobin A1C climbing above 5.2, not above 5.6, above 5.2. When you see your fasting glucose go up, when you see liver enzymes above 25, AST, ALT, GGT, when you see specific inflammatory markers like high sensitivity C-reactive protein climb above the number 1, not lab high, above the number 1. When you see homocysteine going above the number 7, when you see uric acid climbing above 5.5, these are all blood chemistry markers for different forms of inflammatory products. Fibrinogen is another one. So there's platelets even. Looking at your blood work in a way that gives you some clues. Doesn't always give you all the answers. That's one thing. Another thing that people can do is, if you think that perhaps food, regardless of the quality of your diet, if you think food is playing a role, then fast. Do a water fast for 3 days, 5 days. Do a 3 to 5 day water fast and just pay attention to your body. And I promise you, if you have a chronic joint-related syndrome, you're going to experience dramatic decrease. Now, that doesn't mean that not eating food forever is a solution, because that has its own consequences. But having that understanding that, my chronic inflammatory processes are associated with what I eat. So now when I do refeed after a 3 to 5 day fast, I need to pick what I put into my body a little better, and pay attention to what you add back in. You're not going to break a 5 day fast with Doritos and pizza.
Right.
You're just going to dive right back into the mess.
I think our community, and as we launch our community and work with people, that'd be a great challenge to do, walking people together. And I think I'm going to wait for us to do as a community for me to do it, because I have not done the 5 day yet.
Yeah.
So I'll do it with the group. But I think that's an incredible thing to help people do and guide them through that process. I think that'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, it's actually great to do it in community. It's great to know when
misery.
I'm not alone.
I mean, it's fun, meaning it'll be a good challenge.
For sure.
But
for sure.
And I encourage people to do that. And you've said it yourself, like, the first day or two is the worst, and the last days are the easiest.
And again, going back to the community, I mean, we can do subsections on inflammation we can have a whole talk just about inflammation of joints. We can have a whole talk about the GI tract. We have a talk about persistent post-concussion syndrome, which hundreds of thousands of kids are experiencing all the time.
How about skin, the inflammation in skin and acne, and kids dealing with acne, and some adults dealing with acne as well, and lung issues with inflammation there.
The relationship between skin and the digestive system is very...
I got to drop this because I go to my daughter's cross-country meets, and the entire team whips the inhalers out before the race, and it's incredible. And I have to think, where is the inflammation coming from? And not have to think too far as what these kids are eating and what they're stopping at Starbucks for their pink drinks and things like that. And I've seen it. So there's a chronic issue. There's so many chronic issues that are happening from chronic inflammation that people do not know about. Not only just affecting adults in brain fog and their life, but talking about even their kids on a level where even their performance is being affected. They're all on inhalers. It freaked me out. Yeah, I was just there with my rucksack, walking around and watching all these kids with the inhaler before and after. So I can't wait for people to get more and more involved with what we're talking about and helping their families and themselves do better in health. This is such a great format. Why always try to bring this up at the end of the podcast? Why should people listen to you and I?
It's not because we are the most, hyper aware of all the current research that's coming out and all the double-blind placebo-controlled studies.
Although I'd argue that you are. I'm not, but I'm telling you, I've never brought up anything that you haven't really kind of already thoroughly knew quite a bit about.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is we bring things back to core principles. We go back to first principles, where how does the body work, and how can you make decisions? Because if you're waiting for a double-blind placebo-controlled study to tell you to do something, that means everything has been controlled for except one intervention. And then we're trying to measure, did that one intervention have an impact? Did it cure did vitamin E cure heart disease? I mean, it's just a nonsensical question to even ask. But what we do is we say, this is the way the body works. We logically deduce that making these interventions in diet, nutritional supplementation, exercise, using feedback that we get from either blood work or other forms of markers that give us that feedback, and watching progression and saying, yeah, of course, if your visceral body fat goes down, if your blood chemistry improves, if your muscle density goes up and your bone density goes up and your fat percentage goes down, these are things you have to benefit from them.
Right, you do.
And your risk of getting everything, cancer, heart disease, all the things that everyone's afraid of, dramatically goes down. So yes, we're aware of the double-blind placebo-controlled studies because they're informative, but they're not instructive. I'd rather listen to people who have clinical experience, which you and I both each have 30 years clinical experience. We have a philosophy that is sound when it comes to how the human body works. And we, apply these things to ourselves, right? And just because I do 15 different things and you pick one of them, taking vitamin B12, and you're like, well, there's no research to show that taking that vitamin B12, all right, thanks, great. That doesn't change anything. The human body needs vitamin B12. We get it from meat products. I eat a lot of meat products, but I'm over 50 and my digestive system is probably not as good as it once was. And I've been eating under stress a little bit more lately, so I want to take my vitamin B12.
Yeah, right? It's the Wild West. That's the way I look at it. And the ability to navigate people through this process is our passion. It's always been 30 years of clinical experience each. The second piece of that is that we do this. We live this. Everything we're talking about, we can show you our metrics. We want to share that. But I think one of the main reasons that we're dads, we're husbands, and we just love that. We love to help people. We know that there's dads, husbands, moms, dads out there that are trying to help their families make the right choices. And there are those plumbers and there's electricians, the people that make our lives happy, that we want to be able to give this information to, and they may not have the access or the resources. And we don't want them to be part of that 80% that are just following the mob, following the science. we want people to have a resource where they can come and feel comfortable that there's a trusted resource.
We've seen a turnaround in the last 24 months, especially, but maybe going back about 5 years. The calls that we're getting, that I'm getting for sure, of people who are so well educated on health, the plumbers, the painters, the lawyers, everyone is taking the time to learn more about their body because conventional wisdom is not serving them.
Right.
And they recognize that they are an N of one. They have to see what works for them.
Right.
And they do need a trusted advisor, and I think that's what you and I serve as.
Absolutely. So that's why we're here. We want to help them dial it in so they can get it done right. So best ways to do that here, where if you're watching on YouTube, make sure they hit that subscribe button, the bell, so they get the notifications. We love the comments. Wherever you're seeing this, make sure you put the comments in there. We want to get back to you. You're driving our information. The questions that we get every week drives our content.
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how repetitive the questions starting to become in certain categories. And that's what I'm excited about, because there's a definite need for this information out there.
And pay attention to any challenges that we start talking about, because they're coming, and of course building our community. We want a place where people can go and do a deep dive into any subject that they think you and I are knowledgeable about.
That's right. All right. So good. Great show today. Thanks, Greg, for inflammation. We really dialed it in, and I hope that everybody got a great benefit from it today.
Awesome.